Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's Froggy Talking Sports here on a Thursday, coming off a wonderful weekend football. That's if you don't live around here and you're not a Bengals fan or an Irish fan or, you know what, actually it's not been a great weekend football. This is Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. I'm going to introduce myself first because I'm very sad, but Joe, you got a nice smile on your face. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
It must be nice. Did you not watch football part of it?
I did. I'm incredibly sad about the Bengals, but we'll get to that. But UC came out and beat the Kennesaw Owls by a devastating margin of I think like 63-10 or something. It was by a lot of points.
We should have played the Rice Owls.
Yeah.
We probably still would have lost. So anyway, let's try to jump in, Joe. We got some great topics. We're going to go back into some NFL picks, which, again, I was awful at, which I, disclaimer, said I would probably be pretty terrible going against the spread. You had a pretty good week.
Yeah.
You want to stay around 500. So we'll get back into that, and then we'll break down the Bengals' upcoming matchup this Sunday as they go into Jerry's World. But first, something else that made me sad. Kyle Busch. Joe, we talk a little NASCAR. We do a little bit of NASCAR everywhere. We do it on The Grueling Truth. We do it here at Froggy 95.9. And obviously, go ahead and plug our Facebook page. You can check us out there if you're not able to catch all three of our segments, and it'll be on The Grueling Truth and our Facebook page. But big news in NASCAR, possibly the biggest free agent maybe since Dale Earnhardt Jr., who left the number 8 car. Well, now it's free agent news because somebody's joining the number 8 car, and that's, in fact, the guy on my hat and the guy on my shirt that you guys can't see, and that is Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has decided that he is no longer going to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing. He is going to go to Richard Childress Racing, and he is going to boot Tyler Reddick out of the number 8 for at least 1 year before he joins 2311 Racing. And, Joe, it was rumored, and I thought the rumors were silly. And then it was projected that he was going to go there. And I was like, uh-oh. And after all this being said, imagine I come to you 12 months ago when we find out that Mars M&M's is leaving NASCAR. I said, hey, Kyle Busch is going to go drive for Richard Childress next year when he's a free agent. You would have said,
there is no way Toyota's going to let that happen. That's exactly what I would have said. And, I am, while, I'm a NASCAR fan, you're a NASCAR fan, I probably lean toward the Chevrolets a little bit more, so I'm not as devastated by this news as you are. But at the end of the day, you have one of the biggest name drivers in NASCAR. And as Toyota, they have one of the biggest name drivers in Kyle Busch, and they don't do anything to keep him in a Toyota. It's absolutely crazy to me. So, and I know that your fandom kind of leans toward the Toyotas anyway with JGR and Kyle Busch. So I would imagine that there's a lot of devastated NASCAR fans out there right now.
Yeah, it leans that way. I mean, personally, all my vehicles are Toyota. So, I mean, that's been set up since, I've been able to buy my own vehicles, and everything that I drive is that way. So, obviously, it just happened that my favorite driver also drove for the manufacturer that I support with my own wallet. And not just losing Toyota driver Kyle Busch, Chevy also gains Kyle Busch Motorsports. And to me, that is the greatest up-and-coming lower tier, which will be the Craftsman Truck Series next year. They're going back to that. It's the best development organization in the sport, in Kyle Busch Motorsports.
I think that, or maybe a close second to Junior Motorsports, definitely. But
at least in trucks,
right,
Kyle Busch Motorsports is arguably one of the best.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And, my question is, and maybe you've got this figured out, because I'm sure, Ryan, that you put a lot more.
I have nothing figured out. I have nothing. Everything that I thought I had figured out, I described it, and I threw it all in the trash. My NFL projection rankings, my undefeated Cincinnati Bengals season, my Notre Dame trophy that I pre-ordered, the tattoo of the undefeated season that I planned on getting. It's all been thrown away, so go ahead.
So, I guess my question to you as a Kyle Busch fan, and, fandom within NASCAR, unlike, not unlike a lot of sports. I mean, the fandom within college football and the NFL is pretty deep-seated as well, but so is NASCAR. there was people that I know personally that were Dale Earnhardt Sr. fans. And when that tragedy happened, they haven't watched a NASCAR race since because they walked away from it. There are people that were Junior fans that when he decided to retire, they walked away from it. So in the fandom within the NASCAR community, it's not only driver, it's manufacturer, and it's race team.
Right.
So I want to know, Kyle Busch has his fans. He has his following. He's the driver in NASCAR that fans love to hate, especially Chevrolet fans. So my question is, does this work for Kyle Busch? Does he gain fans out of this? Does he gain more fans than he loses?
I think he absolutely gains more fans. I think there's a strong part of NASCAR that grew up about this being American motorsports. And there's still a portion, not a silent portion too, that don't like Toyota because it's not an American-made vehicle. Now, Toyotas are manufactured in the United States, but at the end of the day, people don't care about that. It's a Japanese brand vehicle. So I think Kyle Busch going back to Chevy, I saw so many different things that said, wasn't a Kyle Busch fan, now I'm rooting. And I think that has a part of it because he is not just only the person you love to hate, but he also drives for the manufacturer that has them cheating yoders, as people on social media, which is a wonderful place of knowledge.
It's fact. If you see it on Facebook, it's fact. I've learned that.
Yeah, so, and what's hilarious to me, Joe, it's like life has come full circle for Kyle Busch. He got kicked out of Hendrick Motorsports so a guy named Dale Earnhardt Jr. could drive for Rick Hendrick. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Joe Gibbs Racing. Becomes the greatest Toyota driver of all time. That is not even remotely close, and it'll be hard to ever replace him with what he's done. I mean, he's literally almost won all 200 of his races with the Toyota emblem on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now leaves Joe Gibbs Racing so somebody else can come in. It's for Ty Gibbs. Let's not get it twisted. Ty Gibbs is the reason why Kyle Busch is leaving.
Right.
And then he's going to go drive the 8-car Dale Earnhardt Jr. sold car to finish his entire career. So he lost his first ride to Dale Earnhardt Jr. He's going to finish off his career racing under the same number for Dale Earnhardt Jr. And what's hilarious is over the years, those two fan bases did not like each other of a race that happened in Richmond. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was wrecked by Kyle Busch, and the friction upon that, I mean, literally people giving death threats and things of that nature for when Kyle Busch did that. Yeah, I think that sowed it for everything because it was Kyle Busch was mad about the guy that took his spot.
Right.
And junior motorsports or junior fans, junior, senior, it don't matter who they're a little bit, not to take away the nickname, they're a little rowdy,
right,
to put it politely. So I think, he's going to gain a portion of those because I think with Kyle Busch and Dale Earnhardt Jr. mending their relationship, Kyle Busch and Richard Childress now mending their relationship, I think a lot of Chevy fans are going to think this is a new start.
Well, let me ask you this, and I think really you got to take a look at how did we get to this point, though? I mean, you said that, JGR, Kyle Busch moved because of JGR. His move to RCR is because of Joe Gibbs. I'm sorry, Ryan. JGR, his grandson. Ty Gibbs, I'm sorry. Trying to pull him out of the Xfinity Series up into the Cup Series. And that is absolutely true. I know Grandpa wants his son in a Cup Series car. But why let Kyle Busch go? Why let him slip through your fingers? Why are we keeping Denny Hamlin around? Why are we keeping Christopher Bell around? What is the point of letting the best Toyota driver in the history of the sport slip through your fingers?
One word, money. That's it. It's just money. I think it all comes down to just that. I mean, we're losing an iconic sponsor, and this is to give a quick timeline. Mars Candy, which is M&M's, has been in NASCAR since a lot of us can remember, especially the good old days, whether it was Ken Schrader, Elliott Sadler, insert person, and now it's been iconically dominated by Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch will be the greatest M&M driver of all time, obviously. That, not this year, but last year in Ford Joe Gibbs Racing, hey, we're heading out. Well, guess what? That left a $20 million a year hole. So with Mars Candy leaving, they said they're going to finish out Kyle Busch's contract because in NASCAR your sponsorship is tied to your pay. You know, drivers may go to other teams, but the sponsorships follow that driver because they are the brand promoter of such person. And at the end of that, I think what happened, and this is where Toyota dropped the ball, is they did not think it would be that difficult to find a brand for Kyle Busch, especially one that is the only multi-championship driver in NASCAR. And during that time, you know, there's an opportunity to get Oracle, which is, you know, part of Red Bull in the Formula One, and also the new center for the Golden State Warriors. They dropped out. And a lot of these chief financial people, they interchange so often. I think at the end of the day, Joe Gibbs just said, you know what? We don't have to afford Kyle Busch anymore because of what my grandson's doing. And at the end of the day, when you're the guy writing the checks and it's Joe Gibbs Racing and your grandson's Ty Gibbs and one of the best prospects in NASCAR, it made it easy. But the ramifications moving forward, I'm with you, Joe. Martin Truex has got 1 year left. I think a lot of us were shocked he decided to re-up for one more year.
Right.
Denny Hamlin. Why not tell Denny Hamlin, go race for your own team?
Which I think will eventually happen.
I agree. So then again, you lose Denny Hamlin. And as good as Denny Hamlin has, no championships. Martin Truex Jr., he didn't win a championship with Joe Gibbs Racing. He won a championship under the Denver mattress, and, you know, they decided to leave NASCAR. And then Christopher Bell, I think we're starting to see Christopher Bell, what I've talked about before. I think he's finally blossomed with Adam Stevens into a really good driver. So I would you could have an opportunity to have Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs, and possibly the greatest, certainly a Hall of Famer, not the greatest driver of all time, but one of the 10 best drivers of all time, teaching the two youngest guys on your team, and Kyle Busch, and making their cars better. But instead, they decided to save money. Richard Childress gets blindsided by the Tyler Reddick news and says, you know what? I need to change the motto of RCR. Because you and I have talked on separate shows that I thought RCR was tanking after this.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Somebody else is going to probably merge with them. Maybe Trackhouse buys it, and they become a 4-team operation.
We talked on that topic for 30 minutes.
We did. And then out of nowhere, Richard Childress, I think with the same passion and the same fire Kyle Busch said, no, I'm going to shock the world. And Kyle Busch on the same front said, you know what? They don't think I'm good enough as this 19-year-old. I'm going to shock the world as well, and it was a perfect meeting. Now, I don't know if it's going to work. Those are two guys that historically haven't got along, and most certainly won't get along if Kyle Busch feels like he's playing second fiddle to Austin Dillon.
Well, I don't think the intention is for him to play second fiddle to Austin Dillon. As far as what I've seen on social media right now, I think the intention is to make Kyle Busch the star of RCR. Now, there are some ramifications that I think we need to hit on, and that is Kyle Busch has taken over the number 8 car, which is currently Tyler Reddick's car, and he's under contract with RCR for another season.
Correct.
So what happens to him?
Well, so RCR owns the number 33 and the number 31, and I also believe the number 29. So what he's going to have to do, he being Richard Childress, is he's going to have to – you can rent a charter. Now, that's not cheap. That's usually about $10 million, which is half of what their projected cost is right now. And for Richard Childress to rent a charter just to stick it to Tyler Reddick, which is what he would be doing, I mean, 'cause I don't know if I said this, like, Kyle Busch is kicking Tyler Reddick out of his own car.
Right.
Kyle Busch will drive the 8. Tyler Reddick blindsided Richard Childress, said, hey, in 2024, I'm going to 2311 Racing. So now Richard Childress is going to put, in my opinion, essentially Tyler Reddick in a research and development car. He could care less if he wins in that car.
Right.
Because he has no future there.
And Richard Childress was publicly annoyed by the fact that Tyler Reddick came out and said that he had signed a contract with a different race team in the middle of the season.
He, quote, unquote, put this to the media as his press release says, this could not have come at a worse time.
Right.
And I'm like, did he have a publicist at one point just go, I could have proofread that and edited it so it wasn't that bad. Like I know, Richard, you want to show emotion, but I mean, never. And that's the great thing about NASCAR. It's an emotional business, and what we saw is now it's a cutthroat business and a little bit petty.
Right.
Because Tyler Reddick was informed 1 hour. Oh, by the way, you're not going to be in the 8 car. Best of luck. Can't wait to see you on Sunday. By the way, you're racing for a championship still for us. So, you know, it's an amazing thing that's happened in NASCAR. And, I mean, Joe, where are you at with it? I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, I think Kyle Busch was going to go somewhere. And, you know, with all the rumors that we heard that he could possibly go to this race team, he could go to that race team, though JGR was going to keep him. You know, he was going to have his own race team. He was going to go to Collig Racing. You know, all these different rumors that we heard. I think at the end of the day, if he didn't go back to JGR, this is the best possible outcome for him because he's going to a team with money, with financial support, that is an established team within NASCAR. And I know that you just hit on the fact that, you know, we thought earlier in the season that RCR might be dying out. You know, they might be old news within the sport. And I think maybe RCR kind of felt that way. And I think maybe that's why they went after Kyle Busch. They're trying to rejuvenate their team. I think that this will be a huge kick for the fan base of Chevrolets. You know, and I think, you know, fans.
I think they cornered the market, Joe.
Chevrolets
have dominated this year.
And I think fans like you, even though you may be devastated right now, you have that number 18 hat sitting right there. Yep. And like you joked before, you're just going to put a piece of black tape over the one, and you're going to root for Kyle Busch next year because you're a Kyle Busch fan. I'm going to root for Kyle Busch next year because I'm a closet Kyle Busch fan. And it doesn't matter that he was in a Toyota or not. That, you know, I think he's a good race car driver, and I've always secretly kind of liked the way that, you know, he portrayed his attitude and what he did on the track. So I think at the end of the day, this is a good thing. This is a good thing for the sport because everybody likes drama. Everybody likes a storyline. Yeah. And I think you retain some fans.
Yeah, I think my hope is that this rejuvenates Kyle Busch's career because after he won his second title, he's only won 4 races in the past 3 years. Now, granted, COVID's definitely changed the landscape of NASCAR, but I hope this is something that, you know, Kyle Busch and Richard Childress Racing say, hey, we needed each other and we met each other at the perfect time, and then it ends up being a championship-style partnership moving forward. But that's going to do it here for some NASCAR talk. We're going to dive into Week 2 in the NFL. Appreciate everyone listening in. This is Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening in to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grueling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by Betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at Betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on Betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at Betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.
Welcome back to Froggy's Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan, and joining me, Joe Spillman. And Joe, we're getting ready to talk about Week 2 in the NFL. I tried to hold off football as long as I can. Last week, you went 7-9 against the spread.
That's not bad.
No,
it's not great.
If you split the spread 500 against Vegas, that's a great job.
That means
you know, that's not Vegas. They most certainly
that
don't
means you
win
your money back.
Yeah, they most certainly want me heading there. And I went 5-11 to be transparent, and it felt like it. You know, all weekend felt like it that I went 5-11, and I'm going to try to do a little bit better. You don't have much to improve on. Because if you go like, you know, 9-6 or something like that, you'll be getting calls.
Oh yeah.
You could have your own like show on this. Yeah, no, like call you the Swami or something ridiculous.
I mean, we could come up with a better name than that.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like an Italian dish. But let's go ahead and jump into tonight's game, and that is the Chargers and Chiefs as they're getting ready to kick off in an AFC West matchup. Everybody's been waiting for the AFC West matchups because a lot of people think they're going to be high scoring. The Chargers and the Raiders game was a pretty high scoring game. But now you're looking at what a lot of people think might be the passing of the torch, especially since the Broncos laid an egg on Monday night to Geno Smith. But the Chargers come in on the road as 4.5-point underdogs. So do you want to go ahead and tell me first, how are you feeling between the Chargers and the Chiefs? Is the torch being passed from the young Herbert or from Mahomes to Herbert, or is Mahomes saying this is still my division?
I think it's still Mahomes' division. The Chargers are going into Kansas City on the road. I've been to a game there. That's a very loud stadium.
It's different.
Other than maybe some college games, that's one of the loudest stadiums I've ever been in. As far as the NFL, and it's a hard place to win a football game. And I know the Chiefs are favored by 4. Is that
4.5?
4.5. Okay, they're favored by 4.5. I think that they win. I think they win by more than a field goal. Possibly 2 field goals, maybe a touchdown. I feel like that's where that game's going to be at. So I'm going to take the Chiefs, and I'm going to say the Chargers do not cover the spread.
I originally wanted to take the Chargers, but with the news that Keenan Allen's going to be out with the hamstring, it just takes it away because I feel like Keenan Allen is such a vital part to the Chargers offense, and I don't like the way that the Chargers ran their offense and trying to not use Austin Eckler to the way that he typically has. He's the best running back on that team. And because they view him as possibly being too small, they keep bringing out these plotters, Joshua Kelly, and even resurrected the dead Sony Michel because they thought he had a decent game last year. And it's just taken away that. And I think they're going to do more of the same until these coaches realize, hey, maybe we should just put Austin Eckler out there a lot more than we should. At the end of the day, the NFL is about throwing to your best players or giving your best players the opportunity. But for some reason, the NFL coaches think they're a lot smarter than we at home, and maybe they are. So that's why I'm going to go with Andy Reid, a.k.a. Chef Boyardee, to cover the 4.5 points. So now a team that ended up winning, which is 1-0, and the other team that ended up coming very close, but not close enough. The Manders, or the Washington Potatoes, take on the Detroit Lions. That is a 1.5-point spread, with the Lions being the favorite. So they were 3.5-point dogs last week to the Eagles. The Eagles barely got it done. Joe, how are you feeling about this? Are you going to go Washington or are you going to go Detroit?
I think this is one game that you just kind of got to pick your gut on, and I'm going to go with Detroit in this game. Detroit's favored by 1.5. I think they win by at least a field. I think always you got to figure somebody's going to win by at least a field goal. So I think Detroit.
Colts fans don't think that. Washington, coming off that win last week, I thought Carson Wentz he does what Carson Wentz does. He'll make 2 plays, and you're like, wow, man, what a player. And then he'll make the very next 2 plays, and you go, man, I can't believe he's not holding a clipboard. And I don't know. I think the over is the way to go if you're going to lay any type of value on this game at 48.5. But if I got to pick a team, I guess I'm going to go. I sat at this one and looked at it for a little bit before we got on air, Joe. I'm with you. I'm going Detroit. I'm going to go to the Lions 1.5. Wouldn't be surprised if Washington won. I think they got good weapons. I think they have the better defense, but I think Detroit has the better overall weapons and skill position players. High-scoring game. Give me the guy with the greatest talent on the offensive side, and I'm going to go Detroit. So now moving on to the New York Jets, who looked absolutely terrible, taking on the Ravens, which I was not surprised. I don't think you were either. Taking on the Cleveland Browns, who definitely showed that maybe they don't have a great offense, but that defense is still there to play. Now you're looking at a New York Jets team with very suspect offensive line and Myles Garrett licking his chops to face a statue in this part of his career, Joe Flacco. It's a 6.5-point spread with the Jets being the underdogs. How do you feel about this one?
I think that the Jets lost to a really bad team last week, and I don't think the Ravens are a really bad team. I think the Ravens annihilate that 6.5-point spread. and win by more than a touchdown. So I'm
You mean the Browns?
Yeah.
You said the Ravens. The Jets played the Ravens last week.
The Jets played the Ravens last week. You are correct. The Jets play the Browns.
Correct. Yes, they stay in the AFC North, but they go on the road.
A little out of it tonight, apparently. Ooh. Well, that's a bad team and a bad team going at it. 6.5's a lot with two bad teams.
It is.
So I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to go ahead and take the Jets in that.
Well, this is where we're going to disagree for the first time. I don't know if you know this, but the 50-yard line, there used to be a helmet. Now Brownie's there.
Oh, yeah, I did know that.
But This is what's bothering me.
First time in team history they
he's
have
holding
a logo.
He's holding the lateral portion of the ball, and he's running it. He's most certainly going to fumble. But I don't think the Browns fumble this game. I think they cover the 6.5 points. You got to tell me Joe Flacco's going to win a game on the road against an AFC North defense? I'll just go ahead and go with the Browns. Now moving on to an NFC South matchup. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans did everything they could to lose against the Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Falcons say, you know what? We know how to blow fourth-quarter leads than anybody in football. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road are 2.5-point favorites against the Saints. Joe, how do you feel?
I feel like Tampa should be more than 2.5-point favorites. I think Tom Brady, for 45 years old, looked incredible this past week. He had one hiccup, bad pass for an interception, threw it low. I don't even actually know who he was throwing that interception ball to, but I'll give him that. He's the greatest quarterback that's ever played the game, and while he's not the best athlete on the field anymore, he's certainly the smartest player on the field currently. And I think I don't think the Saints are that good this year. I just don't. I don't think the Falcons were that good. So I'm going to say that Tampa Bay annihilates that 2.5-point spread.
If New Orleans took care of Atlanta the way I thought they should with their defense, I would have said New Orleans. I don't care if they were favored or not. But that defense did not look that good. And for whatever reason, New Orleans defense at the end of the year always is really good. But at the beginning of the year, they're not. The only thing that I'm looking at in this game is typically Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans. They have beef. And it's been a very, very strong matchup, which Lattimore has always won outside of maybe one or two catches against Mike Evans. Well, Chris Godwin's hurt, but Julio Jones is there, and I actually thought Julio looked pretty good.
Julio looked really good, and I'll tell you what, Fournette looked amazing.
Fournette should have got the ball 100 times.
Yeah, Fournette, I know that, anybody that followed that, they said he came into training camp, 50 pounds overweight. Well, you know what? He's a 240-pound muscle running down the middle of the field.
If he came in at 50 pounds overweight, thank God, he would have killed somebody. Right. I saw him kill somebody on a block. I mean, he was chipping, the defensive player of the year and put him on his hind end. So I'm with you. I think Tampa Bay covers the 2.5 points. I think it'll be close at the beginning, but I think Tom Brady finds a way in the second half and ends up winning. And I think, pressure Jameis Winston, make him make mistakes. Now moving on to a surprise team that ended up winning, and one I thought that completely underwhelmed me more than any team in football last week. The Carolina Panthers take on the New York Giants. Carolina is a 1.5-point dog, and the Giants are 1.5-point favorites, 1-0, beating the Titans on the road. Joe, how do you feel about this one?
Well, I think that was last week a pick that I said that the Titans, they had King Henry, and I thought that they would run away with that game.
Literally.
I don't think – I know, Carolina lost to the Browns, but I think that was a game that they should have won. But I don't think that they match up well. What I've seen out of the Giants this past week, I don't think they match up well with them. I think the Giants take this game.
This is where we're going to split again. I think that Brian Dable did show something with his team going for two, which was the biggest pat on your hind end move, going for two to win that game, because it's either win or you lose on the way back. But I think Matt Rule, and this is my jumping off point with Matt Rule. He came from Baylor. A lot of people were really surprised he even got an NFL coaching gig. If he does not give the ball to Christian McCaffrey 20-something times while he's healthy, because that's the big thing, you got to give your best player the ball. If he does not give him the ball and let Christian McCaffrey cook in this game, then I'm out on the Panthers. Everything that I thought possibly could turn around with Baker Mayfield, I'm done. I think what we saw this past week is the quarterbacks on the revenge games, it went up to the head too much. I think they pressed themselves too much. So I think maybe Baker's a little more relaxed this week.
I agree. The only thing that I will say is I think the Giants were better, based on what I've seen. I think the Giants are better than everybody thought they were. At least I thought that they were.
I would agree with that. The thing that surprised me the most is Saquon Barkley looked like Saquon Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
That boy had juice. I mean, he's tiptoeing the sideline, fastest player in the NFL this past week, running the ball. But I think Carolina's got to get it right. Their division's too tough.
Right.
The NFC East, you can win going 500, which is harder now with 17 games, obviously. But these games don't matter as much compared to the NFC South.
We won the division at 8-9.
So I think Carolina covers the 1.5. It's a pick 'em. If you think Carolina's going to win, I mean, you might as well just go ahead and do the spread.
Right.
The Patriots, possibly the worst offense in the NFL last week, take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh comes out of Cincinnati, forcing 5 turnovers out of superstar quarterback, what we thought was superstar quarterback, superstar when he had an appendix quarterback, Joe Burrow. The Patriots, and this line completely blew me away, are 2.5-point favorites going into Pittsburgh. Joe, this is an easy one for me. I'm just going to say it. Pittsburgh starts out their season 2-0.
I absolutely agree with that. I think Pittsburgh defense looked pretty good. Now they have a huge loss, with T.J. Watt. I think he tore his pectoral.
Yes.
And
but didn't need surgery.
Didn't need surgery. I think by last account, 6 to 8 weeks he's going to be out, and he absolutely devastated the Bengals offense this past weekend. But even that aside, I think their defense still played well. I think their offense was sloppy at times, but I'm not going to criticize anybody's offense after the first half we watched, but we'll get into that. But I think you're absolutely right. I think the Steelers start the season this year 2-0.
That's the line that surprised me the most, is that the Steelers are a dog at home against a Patriots team that couldn't score against the Dolphins.
Well, the old regime, people aren't willing to submit to the fact that Bill Belichick just doesn't have a good team.
No, you're right. Possibly the most disappointing team, especially around this area, the Indianapolis Colts, who are tied for the division lead at 0-1, take on the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that they should have put away at the end of the year that got them kicked out of the playoffs. The Colts open up as 4.5-point favorites, and the thing that surprised me in that game, the Colts' offense looked terrible. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback under Frank Reich's system. They cannot score in the red zone, and they come out saying they're going to play better football, Joe, and at the end of the day, they go, you know what, we just got to keep giving it to Jonathan Taylor. I think NFL coaches think they're way smarter than they are. I think they can scheme all these things instead of giving the ball to their best player.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, just give the ball to Jonathan Taylor. If they do that, I think the Colts win. Do you think they're smart enough to do it?
I don't think they're smart enough to do it, but I still think that they cover on that and win the game. So I think they beat Jacksonville this week. One thing that you got to take away as a Colts fan, I think, which we do have a lot of Colts fans in our listening area here, is that's a game that they should have lost. It was 20-3 at one point in that game, and they were able to fight their way back into it and tie the game up. So there is a little light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to that game. And at the end of the day, everybody hates a tie, but if you're an NFL fan and the Colts are your team, that tie's better than a loss.
So you think Indy covers 4.5?
I do.
I'm going to go opposite. I think Jacksonville keeps it close. I think it's going to be a field goal game. And hopefully it doesn't come down to the new kicker for the Colts because Hot Rod just got released.
Yep.
So hopefully the Colts, I think they win, but I think it's going to be 3 points. That's why I'm going to put.
And you're probably right. One of us is going to have a very good week. One's going to have a very bad week this week.
Well, congratulations, Joe, on that. Another great week for Joe Spillman. Miami Dolphins go on the road to take on the Baltimore Ravens. This might be the best matchup in the early games with the Dolphins taking on the Ravens. Both those teams are 1-0. Both of those teams handled their opponents to get to 1-0. 3.5 points dogs are the Dolphins on the road against Baltimore. I'll start it off, Joe. I think the Ravens cover. I think the Ravens show too much for Tua Tagovailoa. I think at the end of the day they're going to put the ball in Jamar's hands, and he's going to be able to handle it. I was really surprised how good Devin Duvernay looked. And also on the opposite side, Rashad Bateman looked for the Ravens. Now that could be fool's gold because they did play the Jets. But I'm willing to say on their home opener, I think they come out really fired up and take one home by more than 3.5 points.
I don't disagree. If this game is in Miami, I think that I'm taking the Dolphins to cover the spread. But this game being the home opener for Baltimore, I think Baltimore does have a good team this year. I hate to say it. I think they win by more than 3.5, so I'm going to go with Baltimore as well.
Well, what's more than likely the biggest spread of the week, the Atlanta Falcons, who did everything they could to lose the game in the fourth quarter, rise up until the fourth, take on the 0-1 LA Rams, who got embarrassed by the Bills on their home field as the opening game. 10.5 points are an underdog, the Ravens. Joe, how do you feel?
They're underdog to the Falcons, right?
The Falcons are 10.5 points.
Yeah. The Rams are. Well, they got something to prove now because they did get embarrassed, and I think the Rams still have a good team. I don't know that they have the Super Bowl worthy team that they had last year, but they definitely still have a good team. They'll be in the playoffs, possibly the NFC Championship game, but 10.5, that's a lot to think about in the NFL. But I'm still going to go ahead and say the Rams cover the 10.5 and win the game. I would say that they're going to probably win by 2 touchdowns or more. You're going to disagree with me? Go ahead.
I don't like the half. I don't like the 10.5. I typically, I don't care what it is. If it's double digits in the NFL, I typically lean the double digit, getting the points. If the Rams won that game in a close way against the Bills and they lost, but they lost embarrassingly to the Buffalo Bills. They looked nothing like the team that they were. So I think the Rams got a lot to prove, and I think they end up taking this one by more than 10.5. Next, going into the more afternoon games, the Seattle Seahawks coming off 1-0, take on the 0-1 49ers, who lost to the Bears in a hurricane. This is 8.5 points in the favor of the 49ers. Joe, how do you feel on this?
I'm going to go with the 49ers in this game.
I'm going to go Seahawks. I think 8.5. I don't think the Seahawks win by any means, but again, over a touchdown, give me the points. I thought the Seahawks played inspired, and maybe they're a little bit better than we thought. That rookie quarterback, Trey Lance, it's not going to take much for him to make a couple mistakes and end up making this to where the spread doesn't hit.
I think the Sea Chickens, I think that was a game like we see in Cincinnati between Pittsburgh, which we'll get to, but I think that there was a little bit different motivation in that game. I think that the Sea Chickens looked better than they were. So
that's fair. Houston Texans go on the road to take on the Denver Broncos. Houston is a 9.5-point dog on the road to the Broncos. It's the home opener for Russell Wilson. How do you feel about that one?
I'm gonna go with Denver in that game.
I'm gonna go back with Houston. I think Houston is the most disrespected team in the NFL when it comes to the spread. I told you that last week.
I'm throwing my hands up now. I'm throwing my hands up.
I understand, but I feel that way. I feel like everybody writes off Houston, and they're really competitive.
I'm not writing off Houston. I just think Denver is a really good football team, and what we saw this past weekend was not conducive.
A coach that wants to kick a 64-yard field goal instead of go for it on 4th and 5?
Right.
Yeah.
It was not conducive to the team that they actually are.
Yeah, well, Nathaniel is a hack. Cardinals go on the road to take on the Las Vegas Raiders. 5.5 points go to the Raiders side. They are the favorite. Joe, how do you feel?
I'm going to take the Raiders. I'm going to take the Raiders cover.
I agree. I think Devontae Adams is going to absolutely light the Cardinals on fire.
I'm not a big fan of the Cardinals.
Sunday Night Football, the Bears 9.5-point dogs to the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay's offense looked absolutely terrible taking on Minnesota. Chicago coming off a win. How do you feel?
I'm going to go with Green Bay, and here's why. I keep saying we'll get to this next segment, and we will. I think there's a reason why a lot of these teams looked as bad as they did this past opening weekend. I'm going to take Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers has got something to prove. He wins by more than 9.5.
He owns the Bears, and he has said so. And I think he does again. I think they end up winning by 9.5. If this game's a lot closer than what it is, if this is up, or the fact that the Packers lose, I am sounding the sirens on a possible really bad season for the Packers. But I agree. I think they rectify what happened against the Vikings. 2 Monday Night Football games, one starting at 7:16. 9.5-point dogs on the road to the Buffalo Bills are the Tennessee Titans. Joe, how do you feel on game 1 on Monday?
That's a lot of points. The Titans didn't look that great. I think the Titans are a good football team, but I think the Bills are a really, really good football team, so I'm going to take the Bills, and the Bills cover the point spread.
I agree. I don't see the way Tennessee scores.
Right.
They're running out 2 rookie wide receivers. Tannehill's not going to win the game by himself. I agree. Minnesota Vikings on the second Monday night game at 8:30 are 1.5-point dogs to the Philadelphia Eagles. How do you feel about this?
I think that is a ridiculous line. I think the Vikings win by probably more than a touchdown, so I'm going to go with the Vikings in that game.
New head coach, you know what he knows how to do? Get the ball to Justin Jefferson. I go ahead with the Minnesota Vikings. I think that they do well, and I think Minnesota's going to surprise a lot of people this year with the offensive mind that they have now put in Minnesota. So that's going to wrap it up for week 2. If you want to follow Joe and I's picks, well, really just follow Joe if you want to make money. That's going to wrap it up. We're going to talk about the Bengals here on segment number 3 to finish it out. You're listening to Froggy's Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. The last segment here on Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. And this is where we can put our heads down and unfortunately revisit the debacle that was Sunday. The Cincinnati Bengals took on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Joe, you and I talked about this the last segment last week. I said I thought this game had a chance to be really close if the defense for Pittsburgh stepped up. You said you were very confident in the Bengals offense.
I was.
And that lasted for 2 possessions after a pick 6 from Joe Burrow, who looked like at times he's never played football before going into that game. So let's go ahead and give a 5-minute synopsis of what we saw Sunday, and then we can Bob Seger and turn the page to what we might see at 4:25 this Sunday when the Bengals take on the Cowboys. You want to go ahead and try to summarize this in words that don't involve words we're not allowed to say on the air?
Yeah, and that's going to be very hard for me to do because
that's more of a grueling truth segment.
It is more of a grueling truth segment because, Ryan, as you know, in Europe they have soccer hooligans. In America, we have football hooligans,
yes.
And I am a football hooligan through and through. I will fight almost to the death for my NFL team, and my NFL team is the Cincinnati Bengals. Since birth, I was born into it. And my expectations this past Sunday and what I saw on that field was absolutely devastating for me. I actually coach youth football on Sundays. So for about I have season tickets down at Paycor Stadium. And for every season for the first 3 games or so, I gotta, I give up my tickets to some close friends and let them go down and enjoy themselves because I do coach. But, I coach the older kids on Sunday, and they usually start right after the Bengals game gets over. And my youth football team won 28-8 this past Sunday.
That's pretty good.
And
you are the greatest football coach of all time, as we
in the Froggy studio right now.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of an asterisk that we tie you in there because we don't want to get sued. But yes.
But I will say, even after the 28-8 win that my youth football team had, I was still devastated on Sunday. And I think what we saw on the field, and we'll get into this right now, is what we saw all over the NFL. And I think it really ties into training camp and the preseason.
Or lack thereof.
Exactly. Because what I saw a Joe Burrow in the first half of that game that looked like he'd never played a football game before. He looked like somebody that just got done playing in the USFL, and the Bengals were like, hey, buddy, we need somebody to throw some passes and give some handoffs for us this weekend. Can you step in and play? And this guy's like, look, I just played 10 games in the USFL. I'm ready.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he looked like for the first half of that game.
He looks like me on Madden.
Yeah. Right, for the first half of that game. And then in the second half, he somewhat looked like Joe Burrow, a very rusty Joe Burrow in the second half of that game. And I think that's because in the second half he had a half of game speed. He got his feet underneath him, and he was ready to play. I don't think we see that out of Joe Burrow this weekend. I could be completely wrong when they take on them boys down in Dallas, but I don't suspect that we're going to see a Joe Burrow that looked like he looked in the first half. Now, the offensive line, which I was very confident in going into this season, also devastated my emotions because it didn't. In first half, second half, they may have picked it up a little bit more the second half, but they looked terrible.
Yeah.
The offensive line was terrible, and that is something that as Bengals fans, every NFL analyst, everybody that wants to pretend like they know what they're talking about in the NFL has said the Bengals will never compete if they don't do anything with their line. And I know that the front office attempted to go out and fix that line a little bit, but it looked bad. And how many times Joe Burrow gets sacked in the first half? 7 times?
He got sacked 7 times in the game. I don't know how many times were in the first half.
Okay. Most of them came in the first half. And
I may have gave myself a concussion at the game.
Right. That can't happen. You cannot compete in the NFL if you cannot find a line that can give your quarterback time to read the defense and throw the ball.
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. More than any other group in pro sports, isn't there a synergy on the line? You're not just going to throw a bunch of mismatched pieces together and say, hey, go out there and do this. Isn't that a group that needs a cohesion so that they have a feel for each other because it's more talking, it's more calling people out. Hey, if they do a stunt, this is what we're going to do here. If they do a twist, this is what we're going to do here. And you just got 4 guys outside. Jonah Williams is the only one that played last year on this team. The other 4 never played with each other ever. And you just threw them out there all at once and say, man, I really hope the best happens against Pittsburgh. Isn't that something that could have changed if they just played any snaps together in the preseason?
Well, and it's always been, I think that it's always been kind of the standard. They play 3 preseason games. The first 2 preseason games are to get your practice squad players out there and see who's going to make the practice squad, see who's going to make the 3rd and 4th team, and see who you can maybe showcase and maybe trade off to somebody. Or get when you put them on waivers, hopefully these players get a chance somewhere else and they get picked up on waivers. But right now, a lot of these teams, they're having such a soft preseason that you're right. This line, lines have to talk to each other. Every one of those guys should be talking and pointing out their jobs and understanding what they need to do. None of those guys played together in the preseason, not even for a series. And I will say this. If a 45-year-old quarterback can go out and play 2 series in a preseason, in the 3rd preseason game, there is no excuse for anybody in the NFL not to go out and play a couple series and see game speed and get ready for the season. That's what it's for. I don't expect Joe Burrow. I don't expect Aaron Rodgers. I don't expect any of these guys to go out and play the 3rd preseason game and play the whole game. But you can go out and play 2 offensive series down the field. And if the issue is we don't want our guys to get hurt, we can't be having our franchise quarterback fall down and get hurt or take a hit and break their leg or tear their ACL, okay, that's great. Why don't you have some common sense as an NFL and put red jerseys on all the quarterbacks and say, hey, they're 2-hand touch.
No.
But if they decide to take off scrambling, you can hit them, which no quarterback should be doing in a preseason game anyway. But I think you got to figure something out because you can't just concede a loss to your season opener every year because none of your starting players have played together all preseason.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is exactly what we saw. I think that what we see now is certainty. Now, Andy Reid's not that type of guy. Andy Reid, you play. I don't care what it's football to Andy Reid. He's old school. But these younger guys, somebody that came from Sean McVay's system, which Zach Taylor did, also showed that they looked absolutely terrible. Matt Stafford was garbage. He looked like he never played football after winning a Super Bowl last year, the same exact way that Cincinnati did. If you're going to not play in the preseason because you don't want to get hurt because you might lose games, then you're essentially saying that, well, we're just going to have sacrifice week 1.
Yeah, we're conceding week 1, and that's exactly what we saw of the Bengals.
You cannot concede games in the NFL.
No, you can't. Because how many conferences come down to 1 game?
Every year.
Or a half game.
Every year.
Every year. How many first-round buys come down to a half game?
Every year.
Every single year. That game, that loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which they should not have done, which I will say, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are a better team than I thought they were this year.
No. Mike Tomlin is a lot better coach than he gets credit for.
Right, and that's a whole other subject that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But Mike Tomlin is a better coach than he gets credit for. Mike Tomlin is a good coach, and he always has been.
Yep.
He took the reins from Bill Belichick, and he said, "This is my team." And
Bill Cowher.
What did I say?
Bill Belichick. Yeah.
Bill Cowher. Spit and Cowher. I'm going to spit all over myself because that's what Bill Cowher did. And he took that team and ran with it. And he's been a great coach. I think this is like his 15th season, maybe. He's been there a while now. But at the end of the day, they are a little bit better of a team than I thought they were. But it shows you really how good of a team that the Bengals can be, because they were down by two scores in that game, and they were able to stay in the game. And in all reality, if you go back and watch the game, they actually won the game. But that's another point that we'll get into, because Zach Taylor decided not to challenge a touchdown reception that was not called a touchdown reception that would have won them the game at the end of the game. So, and not making excuses. You can't put things on officials, but, in all reality, they did win the game if you look at it from that perspective. Now, the wins-loss column shows them 0-1 right now. But really, the coaching, too, is another point that I think we need to hit on, Ryan. I think there was a lot of things in that game. I think the play calling was atrocious.
Can I do this? Because this is
go
my
ahead.
part. This is what I told you, and this is what I've been beating the drum on, is I'm not a Zach Taylor guy. I have said that Zach Taylor has amassed things culture-wise that I think are great for Cincinnati. He has done things that I think have turned the page the way that Zach Taylor wants to do it. But if you come down to an X's and O's person in the NFL, which a lot of this comes down to, I am just not there on Zach Taylor. I think Zach Taylor runs the most predictable offense in the NFL. He just happens to have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, and Joe Burrow, which makes that look a lot better than what it is. And I don't know how much Brian Callahan is with it on the offensive side. But, Joe, I want to go back to, a couple stats that I saw and things that I see with my own eyes. And I am not football smart, okay? But I also notice trends. Because as a coach, which if you coach any sport, you should notice trends. Going into the fourth quarter in an NFL career, Zach Taylor is 1-26 if his team is trailing into the fourth quarter. What does the fourth quarter usually come down to? Who has better game plan? Who made the better adjustments? Who was able to take a possible defeat and turn it into a win? Zach Taylor's not that guy. On the opposite side, when it comes to the play calling, just the play calling in general, the Bengals last year ran the ball 90% when under center. This past weekend, they had 14 plays under center. They ran the ball every single time but once. The one time they did play action, Jamar Chase was wide open over the middle on a deep cover two look, which they ran the entire game after T. Higgins got out. Once they saw T. Higgins was out, they're like, thank goodness we don't have to double anybody anymore. We can just play everybody in front of us. And then out of the shotgun, and by the way, those runs only manage 3 yards a carry from under the center. The shotgun looks, they throw the ball 70-some%. So I think Zach Taylor's got such a predictable offense. You're just banking on the fact that players are able to execute more than what's already been put out on tape. That's how T.J. Watt jumps in the air and steals a pass, because he knows the ball's going in the flat. That's how Minka Fitzpatrick just jumps a stick route on the second play of the game and gets a touchdown. The Bengals coaching staff has to be a lot better, has to find something and do something different, because every time they go under center, I'm like, that's going to be a run. It's going to be a stretch play for Joe Mixon. That's not really his thing, but it's going to be a run.
All right.
Every time they go shotgun, it's going to be a pass. And for whatever reason, when you got T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Zach Taylor thinks they should throw the ball laterally than vertically. This happened last year at the beginning of the year. The Bengals would not test deep. And Joe Burrow, I don't remember him throwing the ball deep one time. And you can say, but Ryan, they got sacked 7 times. I don't care. Jamar Chase, run a 9 route. Go win it. I've seen him do it.
Right. I've seen him do it as well. And one thing I want to hit on, Ryan, is if you see that trend, I can guarantee you every defensive coordinator in the NFL understands that if they're under center, they're probably going to run. And, you know, that really, you know, kind of hits you twofold because, one, you can't run the ball every time you go under center because, like I said, every team's going to know it. But that also tells me that Zach Taylor has absolutely no faith in his offensive line. If he won't run a play action or run any sort of passing scheme out of under center. So
no, I think that's where he came from. I think that's the Sean McVay system. I think that's the modern NFL that runs it out of the spread.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes isn't in the shotgun on every single play.
No.
We know Tom Brady isn't. And I think that this is just the way Zach Taylor's learned, and he's done nothing to be more creative based upon the X's and O's that he's learned working in the NFL under Sean McVay. I feel like, to me, Joe Burrow doesn't have to be – he can play under center and also play in the shotgun, and we can do different things out of both. But right now, it's one-sided either way, and good teams are going to be able to win that. Other teams that don't have the personnel that the Steelers have may end up more victorious off of it and not be able to compete with the skill positions in Cincinnati.
Oh, I can't disagree with what you're saying, Ryan. I just know that, you know, people said this about Zach Taylor last year. I got on Zach Taylor as far as, you know, what I was saying about the guy. I don't personally know Zach Taylor, but I don't think he's a great X's and O's guy, and I don't think he ever will be. And I don't think that he should be involved in the play calling on the offense as he is. He took the team all the way to the Super Bowl last year, and I said that every step of the way. So, you know, that's just where I'm at. Hopefully this week things will get changed around or turned around for them, and they can come out of Dallas with a win.
Well, if you're disappointed in offense, if you're a Cowboys fan, you would take exactly what you saw in the second half because they had zero offense,
right.
And now they don't have their quarterback. Cooper Rush is going to end up starting. Cincinnati is a 7.5-point favorite in that game. Joe, what do you see the Bengals doing to come away victorious in Sunday's game at 425?
Well, I think, you know, we pretty much just talked about this, Ryan. I don't think Joe Burrow comes out and has a half like he had in the first half against Pittsburgh. I think Joe Burrow comes out in this game, and he's Joe Burrow. I think Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase. I don't know if T. Higgins is going to be ready or not. Have you?
He is. He practiced in full today.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, he practiced limited, but he's out of concussion protocol.
Okay, good. And I hadn't heard that information yet, so you know, that's definitely, you know, looking up for them.
Right.
I think that the Bengals are just fine. I don't want to blow the horn on them yet, but if we watch Sunday and it's more of the same of what we saw this past weekend, I think it's already time to hit the panic button.
The thing I want to see, that I thought the defense was good. I was really underwhelmed with how mediocre the defensive line was. Trubisky felt like he had way more time than he should have. I saw today, outside of Zach Martin, you have guys, Joe, that have never taken an NFL snap on two positions on the offensive line for Dallas. So what we saw last week for Cincinnati, hopefully we see that with Dallas, and we see a lot of Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. I want to see Joe Mixon. I feel like with the undersized defensive line that the Cowboys have, like we saw with Leonard Fournette, just absolutely maul, with not a great offensive line for Tampa Bay. They've had their problems the entire offseason, losing guys like an Alex Kappa to Cincinnati, losing guys to injury. I want to see Joe Mixon dominate this coming Sunday.
Me too. I mean, I can't add anything to that. I do think the Bengals win by more than a touchdown in this game. I do, and that's not being a super fan of the Bengals. I think they match up that well against this team. So
I will say that they don't cover, but I think they win, and that I don't like that. I think they win by 7. I will continue to say that, you know, like I think Cooper Rush is better than what people think. I think he has zero weapons. I will say that, outside of CeeDee Lamb, but I think it's going to take a few weeks to get right, and I think we're going to see that. If last week was preseason game 1, then hopefully we're closer to preseason game 3 this week.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be midseason for them come game 2, but I will definitely eat crow, and if they end up winning by 25, I'll be the first one to say I'm glad they finally turned it around.
Well, good, because that's what I'm hoping for.
Well, that's going to wrap it up here. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure that you join us on our social media pages at Froggy Talkin' Sports with Ryan and Joe. You can find that on Facebook, and also check in on The Grueling Truth. We have plenty of articles that are wrote there and also cover multiple other sports on that website, and we also, this show and other shows are on there as well. That's going to wrap it up here. We hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay safe and God bless.